Good evening, dear Medyascope viewers. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. This evening, our guest will be Rıza Türmen, a former MP at the Turkish Parliament and a former judge at the European Court of Human Rights. Mr. Türmen will be joining us to speak about Erdogan's newly unveiled Human Rights Action Plan. But first, let's take a look at this week's developments. A military helicopter crashed in the eastern province of Bitlis's Tatvan district, killing 11 soldiers and injuring 2 others. Defense Minister Hulusi Akar stated that a sudden deterioration in weather conditions is likely behind the deadly military crash. He said the exact cause of the crash will be determined following a detailed investigation. We send our condolences to the families of the killed soldiers. And now for the coronavirus-related developments of the week. According to the data released by the Ministry of Health, the daily number of new cases on March 4th has been announced as 11,322, and the number of deaths as 68. These numbers have led to the total number of cases to reach 2,746,158, and the death toll to become 28,839.
This week, Turkey has eased lockdown measures across the country under what it is calling controlled normalization. The implementation of these normalization measures have been done according to a map where each city's current COVID-19 risk rating is indicated. Low-risk cities are represented by blue color, medium-risk cities by yellow color, high-risk cities by orange color, and very high-risk cities by red color. Every week, the Health Ministry will update the risk level of each city on its website, and the list of measures will be updated every 2 weeks on a province-by-province basis. In accordance, Istanbul was categorized as high-risk, while the capital Ankara was in the medium-risk category. Weekend curfews, which began to be implemented in December, have been lifted from cities deemed low-risk and medium-risk. The curfew will remain in place for high-risk and very high-risk cities only on Sundays. The weekday curfew between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. will continue throughout the country. Cafes and restaurants will be allowed to operate between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. at 50% capacity in cities, except for very high-risk ones. The partial curfew imposed for citizens over the age of 65 or under the age of 20 will be lifted for low-risk and medium-risk cities, whereas their curfew hours will be extended for high-risk and very high-risk cities. Under current regulations, senior citizens may only go outside between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m., while citizens aged 20 and under may only go outside between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. Moreover, all preschool education institutions across Turkey, elementary schools, grades 8 and 12, have resumed face-to-face education as of March 2. However, Turkey's COVID-19 normalization has worried experts as the number of cases continues to increase. According to Dr. Nuriye Ortaylı, who is a consultant in health and development,
while it is a relief that they have finally decided to reveal case numbers according to provinces, which is something experts have been asking for the past 11 months, the number of daily cases has increased by nearly 50% since the end of January. So we're not at a stage for normalization. Normalization cannot be done according to a schedule, but should be done according to the data at hand. The provinces marked in red cannot even think about normalization. They need to be put under full lockdown. Moreover, the political party congresses have recently been organized in those provinces, so in a couple of weeks, the number will no doubt explode.
As for whether or not the vaccination process underway will have any effect on the numbers, Dr. Ortaylı stated,
I hope that the number of deaths, especially of medical personnel, will decrease. The speed at which the vaccination process is going is not nearly fast enough when compared to the rate at which the virus is spreading. The vaccine is a tool. It is not a magic wand, but I still hope it will help decrease the number of deaths among medical personnel.
Researchers from the Ankara-based Hacettepe University have shared the results of the Phase 3 clinical trials of the CoronaVac vaccine. While a preliminary finding for the efficacy of the vaccine had been indicated to be 91.25%, the current results show that the vaccine is 83.5% effective against COVID-19.
The final efficacy rate was based on 41 infections, 32 of which had received a placebo, said Murat Akova, head of the Phase 3 trials conducted in Turkey. The rate is based on participants who presented at least one symptom of COVID-19, along with a positive PCR test at least 14 days after the second dose of the vaccine, Akova said. He added that the vaccine prevented hospitalization and severe illness in 100% of the cases, saying the 6 people who were hospitalized were all in the placebo group. Turkey had announced a preliminary result with 29 infections in December, which placed the efficacy rate at 91.25%. Worldwide trials of the coronavac have shown wide variations in efficacy rates, leading to some criticism. The final results in Turkey were based on a 10,216 participant study, 6,648 of whom received the vaccine as part of the phase 3 study that began mid-September. The volunteers were aged 18 to 59, with the median age being 45, while 57.8% of the volunteers were men and 42.24% of them women. Turkey has already administered 9.32 million doses of coronavac across the country in a campaign that began in mid-January. More than 2 million people have received 2 doses.
On March 2nd, the political party's Office of the Court of Cassation, Chief Public Prosecutor's Office, launched an investigation into the People's Democratic Party about a recent indictment against its party members. The Chief Public Prosecutor's Office requested a copy of the Kobani indictment, as well as a summary of proceedings regarding the removal of parliamentary immunities.
The political party's office wrote a letter to the Ankara Chief Public Prosecutor's Office. They requested a copy of the indictment of the 108 people who were put on trial due to the Kobani incidents and the summaries of proceedings seeking to lift the immunity for 9 People's Democratic Party lawmakers, including the party's co-chair, Pervin Buldan. The Chief Public Prosecutor's Office concluded that the HDP had become a focus of terrorist acts and, as a result, a case for the party's closure may be filed. This decision came right after Nationalist Movement Party chair Devlet Bahçeli called on the courts to take action and shut down HDP. Regarding the question of the closure of the HDP, Medyascope editor-in-chief Ruşen Çakır stated the following to Medyascope viewers. The question here is not what the court or what the chief public prosecutor will decide. The question here is what Erdogan will decide. At this stage, he might seem supportive of this action. However, a judicial process that will result in the closure of HDP will most likely leave Erdogan in further political hardship. President Erdogan has been calling for the prosecution of the HDP members of parliament, accusing them of acting as a political wing of the PKK, a terrorist organization recognized by Turkey, the United States, and the European Union. In accordance, there has been ongoing talks for government officials on removing the parliamentary immunities of some MPs. Last week, 195 MPs were submitted a summary of proceedings seeking to remove their legislative immunity to Parliament. As of this week, the number of MPs who face losing their immunity has become 203.
On March 2nd, President Erdogan unveiled a human rights action plan intended to strengthen the rule of law and judicial independence in the country. The opposition's response criticized the plan as it contradicted the government's actual actions.
The Human Rights Action Plan is part of Erdogan's judicial and economic reforms and consists of 9 goals, 50 targets, and 393 actions. Speaking at the introductory meeting of the Human Rights Action Plan of 2021, Erdogan said that the execution of the plan is expected to be completed within 2 years. The plan focuses on the issues of freedom, the right to fair trial, freedom of speech, and women's rights. During his address with regards to the action plan, President Erdogan stated the following: "Everyone is equal before the law, without any discrimination on the basis of language, religion, race, color, gender, political opinion, philosophical belief, sect, or similar factors. No one can be deprived of freedom because of expressing criticism or thoughts. The laws must lay out clear, understandable, and predictable rules without causing hesitation, and public authorities must implement these rules without compromising the principle." He also added that in order to increase the freedom of expression standards and of the press, Turkey is developing new measures to support the professional activities of journalists. In addition, he mentioned that a committee would be set up to observe the human rights conditions in prisons, and an annual human rights report on Turkey would be published. Ultimately, Erdogan returned to the issue that he mentioned repeatedly this year, saying that the final aim of the Human Rights Action Plan is a new civilian constitution. Reactions and comments to Erdogan's action plan were critical of his current actions and future plans contradicting one another. On March 3, Turkey's main opposition, Republican People's Party politicians, condemned Erdogan's speech, referring to Erdogan's statement that no one will go to jail due to what they think and believe in. CHP chair Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu said, "Jails are now full of people imprisoned due to what they think. There are thousands of people in prison because of their beliefs." On the same note, CHP Parliamentary Group Deputy Chair Engin Altay referred to the university students faced with disproportionate police force, investigations, detentions, and house arrests. Before unveiling the Human Rights Action Plan, Erdogan should apologize to Boğaziçi students. 900 children are currently being prosecuted for insulting you. Will you continue to talk about human rights? Altay said. Professor Şule Özsoy Boyunsuz, a professor at the Law Department of Galatasaray University and constitutional law expert, evaluated Erdogan's action plan and compared it to the Supreme Edict of Gülhane, which was an Ottoman proclamation that launched the Tanzimat period of reforms in 1839. This period is seen as the first steps to westernization in Turkish history and the push for the Ottoman Empire to adopt basic democratic values.
Do you know what came to my mind while listening to this? The Supreme Edict of Gülhane. In this day and age, I was very surprised to hear such things. Do you know what is surprising? All of this already exists in our constitution. None of these need to become a principle, because all of these clauses are already law. They just don't abide by it.
In accordance with the current human rights debate in Turkey, Freedom House published a country report on Turkey under the title of Freedom in the World 2021. In the report, Turkey received a freedom score of 32 out of 100 and is marked as not free. The Freedom Report states that Erdogan continues to exert tremendous power in Turkish politics. In addition, the opposition's victories in the 2019 municipal elections, as well as the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the already shaky economy, have given the government new incentives to suppress dissent and limit public discourse. Regarding the key developments from 2020, Freedom House mentioned the manipulated health statistics regarding the COVID-19 crisis and the overlooking of the European Court of Human Rights rulings for the immediate release of Selahattin Demirtaş and Osman Kavala.
This evening, our guest is Rıza Türmen. Mr. Türmen is a former diplomat, member of parliament, and judge for the European Court of Human Rights from 1998 to 2008.
Hello, Mr. Türmen. Thank you so much for joining us on This Week in Turkey.
Well, it's my pleasure to be with you.
So for a very long time now, one of the areas in which Turkey has been criticized the most, both nationally and internationally, has been its track record on human rights violation. And this week, President Erdogan revealed his government's human rights action plan. What is your initial evaluation of this action plan? And does it address Turkey's concrete problems in the domains of freedom of speech and human rights?
Well, I think the main problem with the action plan is that it lacks credibility. It lacks credibility in two respects. One respect is that the ongoing developments while the action plan has been announced, like, for example, when the action plan was being announced, there was another action initiated in the parliament to remove parliamentary immunities of both opposition members, parliamentarians, both HDP and CHP parliamentarians. At the same time, there has been another action triggered for closure of HDP, which is the second opposition party in the parliament. At the same time, European Court of Human Rights judgments are not executed by Turkey. Erdogan openly declared that he would not implement them. But at the same time, this week, the forthcoming week, in the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe, the question will be discussed how to make Turkey to execute the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights. While all this happening, the Boğaziçi University students, they were protesting against the appointment of the rector, and they are, a vast majority of them are put into detention. They are accused of being member to a terrorist organization for their very innocent action of protest. Hundreds of journalists are in the prison at the time being. for the time being. There is the appointment of Mr. Fidan to the Constitutional Court. Mr. Fidan is the favorite prosecutor of Mr. Erdogan, and he has been appointed to the Constitutional Court from the quota of the Court of Cassation, but he has never served at the Court of Cassation. I mean, this is one area of concern, which brings me to this judgment that it lacks credibility. But there is another aspect of the question. In an action plan like this, what ought to be done is to identify the problems and to try to bring concrete solutions to these problems. That is to say, the content of the action plan. This has not been done in the action plan. The main areas of human rights problems in Turkey is, for example, freedom of expression. This is a major area of problem of area. There is, what does it say, the action plan? That the relevant legislation will be reviewed and standards for freedom of press will be raised. This means nothing. It means nothing because there are very serious problems as far as freedom of expression, freedom of press is concerned. I mean, there are problems rising from the legislation, prevailing existing legislation. Like there are offenses like insulting the president. Insulting thousands, like 17,000 cases are brought against press and different kinds of people for insulting the president. Such an offense does not exist anymore. Insulting the president. Why should you need an extra protection for the president when you have a general insulting offense? There are offenses like assisting a terrorist organization on behalf of a criminal organization without being a member of it, which of course is a very peculiar offense, or disseminating terrorist propaganda, or degrading Turkish nation. I mean, offenses like this, where there are no clear cut boundaries, where you are not, where things are not foreseeable, which are not clear, they create problems for freedom of expression. And nothing has been said to remedy this problem. Another problem area is, for example, is the deprivation of liberty. People are put under detention in Turkey for no good reason. The peace judges in the Turkish system, they take decisions for putting people under detention without any convincing evidence, disregarding exceptional nature of detention and disregarding totally the principle of presumption of innocence. So dissidents, journalists, they are all charged with terrorism related to offenses without any evidence. I mean, another problem area is, of course, the independence of judiciary. Independence of judiciary is a big problem in Turkey. And the key to independence of judiciary is the board of judges and prosecutors. Because the board of judges and prosecutors, this board has the power for disciplinary measures and appointment and transfer of the judges. And they exercise their power without any hindrance, very generously. Yeah. So nothing has been said about this, about the board, independence of the board of judiciary. The board of judiciary, of course, is not an independent organ. If you want to have an independent judiciary, the key to this is the board of judges and prosecutors. If you cannot ensure independence of this board, you cannot ensure independence of judiciary. And nothing has been done in this action plan to this end. I mean, I can increase such examples, but these are very few examples. So the main problem areas are not tackled with, you see, and I think the reason for that goes deeper. It is the regime which does not allow, the prevailing regime now in Turkey, which, well, you can call anything. You can call it a sultanist regime, authoritarian regime, or whatever, but certainly you cannot call it a democracy. And this regime does not permit to take any more radical actions to bring solutions.
Yeah. Mr. Türmen, you've greatly summarized the problem areas of the plan and also highlighted the paradox between, the actual statements, the intentions or whatever, and the actual actions and what is happening in the landscape when it comes to both human rights, freedom of expression, and so forth. On the other hand, the action plan was revealed. Do you have any ideas as to why Erdogan is doing this at this particular time? Some have stated that it has a lot to do perhaps with the new Biden administration, who has highlighted on several occasions the importance, their renewed attitude towards democracy at home and democracy in the world. Do you think it is related to that?
Yeah, well, yes, of course, it is related to I think, a number of things. Mm-hmm. It is related, well, there are both economic and political reasons. Economy in Turkey is not doing too well, particularly after the epidemic. It has gone down, it has declined, and poverty has reached immense proportions, immense dimensions. So Turkey needs foreign investment from the West. So this is, I think, one reason why Erdogan is trying to ameliorate his relations with the West. But another reason is political, because they complement each other, of course, economic and political reasons. Politically, Turkey has reached a stage in the Western public opinion and in Western organizations to which it's a member, where its democratic and human rights deficiencies can no longer be tolerated. For example, in the Council of Europe, recently there has been a resolution which was debated and passed with an overwhelming majority at the Standing Committee meeting at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which criticized the overall human rights situation in Turkey, and also criticized functioning of the institutions, of democratic institutions in Turkey. But what is interesting is that during the debate, for the first time, Turkey's membership to the Council of Europe was questioned. This never happened before. This is for the first time. So it has been reaching to such a dimension. Well, as I said, next week, the Committee of Ministers of the Parliament of the Council of Europe will be debating on how to go about Turkey's non-compliance with the European Court of Human Rights judgments. So also there are political reasons, that Turkey wants at least to have an appearance of a democracy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and as you mentioned, there is this need to reassure for both economic and political reasons, but there is the problem of believability, because the words and actions do not correlate with one another, unfortunately.
Yes, there is a big gap between words and actions. If you read the action plan, it's lots of sweet words, politically correct wording, but the factual situation does not correspond to that.
Mr. Türmen, you mentioned a couple of times, and now that we have you here, I'd like to ask, Turkey is a member of the European Court of Human Rights, and the laws and decisions are binding, yet Turkey has not implemented the decisions that have been taken by the court. So as a matter of fact, just 2 days ago, a proposal by the HDP in Parliament to discuss the rulings of the court concerning Turkey was rejected by the AKP-MHP coalition. So could you tell us a little bit about the process after this, and what would be some of the consequences if Turkey keeps ignoring the decisions coming out of the European Court of Human Rights?
The convention of the European Court of the European Convention on Human Rights is very clear. The judgments of the court have a binding effect, and they must be implemented by the states, by the member states. I mean, there is no any exception, there is no any doubt about this. And this debate that has been initiated in Turkey about the binding nature of the judgments is completely artificial, has no legal basis at all, and no such debate ever made in other countries. The convention clear. If you are a party to this convention, you have to abide by the articles of this convention. So it is the Committee of Ministers which is responsible for execution of judgments. Now, the Committee of Ministers in Osman Kavala case have adopted 3 resolutions for the implementation of the judgment, and Turkey has not implemented. The execution of judgment, it means that you have to end the violation, and you have to bring the former situation before violation. And what is, in cases of detention, unlawful detention, how do you end the violation? You release the detainee. There is only one way of implementing the judgment. So all these Committee of Ministers judgments, they ask Turkey, they request from Turkey for release of Osman Kavala, which Turkey has so far rejected. Now, what will happen in the forthcoming meeting, which is 9th of March? The Committee of Ministers may start infringement procedure, which is to say, if there is a 2/3 majority at the Committee of Ministers, the Committee of Ministers may adopt a decision whereby transferring the case, sending the case back to the court, and asking the court to give a new judgment, because non-compliance with the judgment, non-execution of the judgment is itself a violation of the convention. So if the court says in a new judgment that that Turkey is not complying with the judgment, then the road to further sanctions is opened. Further sanctions may be several. It depends on the Committee of Ministers, but at the end, it may lead to the exclusion of Turkey from Council of Europe. I mean, suspension of its voting rights, and then excluding Turkey from Council of Europe, ending its membership to the Council. It may lead to this. This is, of course, a very, very serious sanction. So we shall see what will happen next week.
Yeah.
But it is not possible. I mean, you are a member of you're a party to a convention, and then you don't accept the convention rules. Mm-hmm. This is you belong to a club, but you don't play the game by the rules. Well, this is not possible.
I mean, Turkey is not following the conventions that it is party to internationally, but many have also stated that the government is not implementing even the Turkish constitution. And as a matter of fact, the Human Rights Action Plan, there is, as you mentioned, nothing new about it, because if the constitution were to be implemented, there would be no need for such a thing. So what do you believe that the role of the opposition in Turkey should be in calling out Erdogan and in implementing the constitution, other than simply condemning these violations?
Well, the constitution, of course, contains general principles. Mm-hmm. these general principles are not always complied with, but I mean, these are general principles. And of course, it is the laws which, put into life to these general principles. And the laws in Turkey, I wouldn't say the laws are perfect in Turkey. Well, some of them I already mentioned, and these laws, they are not foreseeable, they are not clear, and they gave a leeway to the judges for arbitrary action. That, of course, should be amended. These laws should be changed if you want to have a proper human rights regime in Turkey. So I wouldn't really say that the laws in Turkey are good, but it is the application of them which is the problematic. It is not like this. The laws are also problematic, I'm afraid. It is both. It's a combination of both. It's arbitrary application and bad laws.
And Mr. Türmen, my last question would be in regards to kind of the future, how you see the future. I mean, Turkey, all opposing voices in Turkey are living in a general kind of climate of fear, which affects, freedom of speech and so forth. And you mentioned earlier as well that hundreds of citizens face prosecution for, far-fetched charges of insulting the president and so forth. So how can Turkey recover kind of the loss of trust and fear that, has been engendered so far? Where do we start?
Well, as far as the opposition parties are concerned, of course, what is going on in Turkey, the society is extremely polarized, deliberately, intentionally polarized by the ruling party, and a kind of artificial nationalism has been created. A jingo nationalism has been created, which encompasses the whole society. I mean, the opposition parties should have the courage to refuse this jingo nationalism. And the opposition parties should have the courage to tell the truth to people. Because in this aura of nationalism, the truth is hidden. The opposition parties should have the guts to remove the blanket over the truth. Mm-hmm. But of course, this is not enough. There is the whole society, there is the half of the country which votes against Erdogan. Now, this half of the country should be organized, I think. This is very important. The civil society. But there is this, Hannah Arendt says, authoritarianism raises on the shoulders of silent masses. So the masses should not be silent. The masses should be active in politics. So we are, a project is being carried out to hold a conference on democracy, where all the right claimers, economic rights or democratic rights, they should come together, because this is economic rights and democratic rights, they constitute a whole. So they should come together in this conference and unite their forces and raise their voice and let their voice be heard then.
Rıza Türmen, thank you so much for having joined us this evening. Thank you.
You're most welcome. It has been my pleasure.
Former co-chair of the People's Democratic Party, Selahattin Demirtas, who has been in jail since November 2016, has penned an article for Medyascope. Here's a translation of the article for our non-Turkish speaking viewers.
The tragedy that has occurred in the Gare mountain a couple of weeks ago has reminded us, quite painfully, that peace is fundamental. The political strategies employed by the government have long overstepped the limits of logic. Unfortunately, there is nothing which is out of bounds in the name of keeping power. Turkey's politics and the state should not give in to this eclipse of reason. Among such devastation, there needs to be a sincere attempt at keeping the hope for peace alive. Instead of employing arms and violence as solution methods, we must take democratic politics as the basis of our methods. We cannot give up on democratic politics. Responsible politicians must create a permanent and clear infrastructure for a solution without losing any more time. The government is not looking to establish peace. On the contrary, it can clearly be seen that peace is inconvenient for the government. Just because this is the case does not mean we should stay silent to the deaths occurring. We cannot simply watch, as this will make us lose our humanity. The opposition has a huge responsibility to find democratic and peaceful methods for a solution. There have been many statements coming from the opposition in order to find a solution. However, in parallel with these statements, unfortunately, no concrete steps have been taken. Will the pain and the deaths continue, or will there be concrete steps taken in the name of peace? I believe it is time for us to be more courageous for peace. We cannot lose any more time. The need for concrete political steps is long overdue. Those who believe in peace must come together and find political solutions and explain it to the people. Turkey has the ability to establish peace. Even if the government is not doing it, the opposition must gather its courage and put forth the fact that arms have no place on the agenda of Turkey. They must continue to make statements, publish reports, and statements that verbalize their intentions for peace, followed by concrete steps and politics in this regard. Those who believe in peace must support these initiatives and amplify the hopes for peace. All democratic forces in the nation, including the HDP, should take initiatives for peace and put forth a concrete roadmap to save the people from this chaos and despair. HDP has made some efforts in this regard, but should redirect its political strategy, political language in line with these goals. It is clear that talks about shutting down the HDP will not contribute to peace. This is a cheap political calculation, and I hope we will not fall into this mistake once again. We do not have another choice but to live in peace together. We have to solve our problems through dialogue. The war must end, and we should be able to end it without outside pressure. In order to overcome foreign intervention in the Middle East, it is adamant to establish a new strategic unity with the Kurds. We cannot give up on a political solution just because previous efforts have failed. The Kurdish question cannot be solved through conflict, but through democracy. The HDP and other opposition parties have voiced this opinion on numerous occasions. Now it is time to support these statements with concrete steps and prove it to the world. Let us not wait for more pain to fall upon us. We can overcome all these difficulties together. Let us not forget that democracy, the economy, and peace are all interrelated and should be taken into consideration altogether. I invite all those who want peace to take action, not simply condone this and that, but to take initiative to end the violence and the arms from taking center stage. Instead of envisaging arms and violence as a method to reach a solution, we must take democratic politics as our point of departure. I realize that I'm speaking about peace at a time where poverty has increased, health problems have been aggravated due to the pandemic, and society has become deeply polarized. However, this is a pressing matter, and without dialogue, no permanent solution will be found. That is why, despite everything, it is time to amplify hope for peace. Those of us who want peace are ready for it.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m. Good night.
Geliyor. 8 Mart geliyor. Dev indirimlere hazır mısınız? Böylesi görülmedi. Bu indirimlere kayıtsız kalamayacaksınız. Namus indirimi. Tahrik indirimi. Kravat takma indirimi. Evden erkek sesi geliyordu indirimi. 2020 yılında Türkiye'de 300 kadın cinayeti işlendi. Verilen cezalarda anlaşılması güç indirimler uygulandı. Suçlular bu indirimlerden yararlanamadığında 8 Mart Dünya Kadınlar Günü kutlu olacak. İstanbul Sözleşmesi'ne kulak verin. Lütfen indirmeyin.